This story is titled Blood Betrayal. My own brother stole everything, so I took it all back. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's video, I need a quick favor. We've noticed the channel's been losing some momentum, and one of the best ways you can help is by subscribing. It's fast, free, and makes a huge difference in helping us keep creating awesome content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much, and now let's get into the video. I never expected my own brother to steal from me. I never thought my family, the people I spent years supporting, would help him do it. But the worst part? They didn't just steal money. They stole my father's inheritance, my credit, and even my future. And when I finally confronted them, my brother looked me dead in the eye and said, "You have no wife, no kids, no life." At Christmas dinner, that was the moment I knew. He thought he'd won. He thought I'd roll over and take it just like I had every other time. He was wrong. Let me back up. My name's Dom. I'm 33. I didn't grow up rich, not even close. We were the kind of poor where you ate toast for dinner and pretended it was a meal. My dad was a mechanic, but not the kind with a shop. He worked out of our backyard, always saying, "Next month I'll get my certification, open a real garage." Next month never came. My mom worked 2 jobs, but no matter how hard she worked, we were always behind on rent, dodging eviction notices like it was a game. I learned early that if I wanted something different, I'd have to fight for it. I got my first job at McDonald's on my 14th birthday, then worked nights at a warehouse while going to community college. Taught myself coding on an old library computer, got my IT certification, and finally, after years of exhaustion, I landed my first real tech job. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't struggling. My first paycheck didn't go towards something for myself. It went to paying my mom's past due rent and fixing her teeth. She'd had a bad tooth for years but could only afford aspirin. I helped with bills, bought groceries, even covered Christmas gifts for my brother's kids. And Jake? My older brother? He was pissed. See, Jake always hated that I went this soft route, computers and office job. He followed in Dad's footsteps, fixing cars in his driveway, talking big about how he was going to open a shop one day. But the difference? I actually made my dreams happen. At first, it was little things. "Hey man, my car broke down, can you help?" "Hey, the kids need school clothes, we're tight this month." But then it escalated. Jake and his wife Sarah wanted to buy a house, but their credit was trash. They needed a co-signer. I should have said no. But I thought they're family. They wouldn't screw me over. I was an idiot. At first things seemed fine. Then came the digs. "Must be nice having all that money while your family struggles. You think you're better than us just because you went to college?" Never mind that I was still paying for their crap, still fixing their finances, still helping Jake with his business paperwork. Then my dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He barely lasted 7 months. And that's when the real betrayal started. While I was grieving, Jake and Sarah were plotting. They manipulated my dying father into signing everything over: the house, the garage, the savings. The inheritance Dad specifically set aside for me? Gone. I didn't even know until Christmas dinner. That's when Jake, sitting at my father's table, looked me straight in the face and said, "It's all been transferred. It's done." Sarah, smirking beside him, added, "It's perfectly legal." Then Jake leaned back and laughed. "You don't have a wife, no kids, no life. You don't need it anyway." My mom just sat there staring at her plate. She knew. They all knew. And that's when it hit me. They thought they could get away with it. They thought I'd walk away. They had no idea who they were messing with. Jake and Sarah thought they had won. They sat there at Christmas dinner, smug as hell, acting like I was some loser who didn't matter. Like they hadn't just stolen my entire inheritance. Like they hadn't used my name to open credit cards, take out loans, and drain every cent my dad left for me. And my mom? She just sat there. Silent, like she was too ashamed to even look at me. I wanted to explode. To flip the table. To scream. To do anything. But I didn't. I just sat back, let their words sink in, and stared at my brother. He was too comfortable, too cocky. That was his mistake. He thought I was weak. He thought because I'd never fought back before, I never would. That was his miscalculation. Because I wasn't about to just walk away. I wasn't about to let them take everything my father left behind and act like it was nothing. They thought they could play me? They had no idea what was coming. The thing is, this wasn't just some one-time betrayal. It had been building for years. I grew up broke as hell. We weren't the can't afford Starbucks kind of poor. We were the no electricity, eating ramen every night kind of poor. My dad was a backyard mechanic, always talking about, next month, opening his own shop. That month never came. My mom worked 2 jobs, barely scraping by. Me. I worked the second I could, McDonald's at 14, warehouse night shifts at 18. Barely slept. No time for fun, no. Time for friends. I studied in between shifts, teaching myself IT with an old library computer, because I wasn't about to get stuck in the same damn cycle of poverty. Then came my big break, my first tech job. Suddenly, I was making more money than my parents combined. And what did I do? I paid their rent, their bills, their groceries. I even co-signed Jake's mortgage because his credit was trash. I gave and gave and gave. And they took, and took, and still, it wasn't enough. They hated that I was doing better. They mocked me for working in tech, called me a sellout. And yet, when their fridge broke, when their credit cards were maxed out, when they needed just a little help, guess whose phone they blew up? And I answered. Every single time. Until now. Now it was my turn. I should have seen it coming. The way Jake and Sarah always had some new excuse, some urgent crisis that needed money. The way they'd ask casual questions about my work schedule, my finances, my future plans, like they were just being curious. But I didn't. Because I was an idiot. Because I still believed deep down that they were family. That belief shattered when I found out what they did. It started small. Rachel, my fiancée, noticed weird charges on my bank statements. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a billing error. Maybe fraud. But the numbers didn't make sense. It wasn't just one weird charge. It was dozens. Credit cards I never opened. Loans I never took out. Then the real kicker, my dad's inheritance? Gone. Jake and Sarah had gotten power of attorney while Dad was sick. Used his illness as a cover to move everything into Jake's name. The house, the garage, the savings, every last cent. It was all legal. I sat there in stunned silence as Sarah explained it to me on Christmas Day, like she was telling me the weather. We had to make some decisions for the family, she said, sipping her wine like she didn't just nuke my entire future. Jake. He didn't even look at me. Just sat there, smug as hell, nodding along while Sarah did all the talking. You have a good job, she continued, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You don't need the money. We do. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. I could feel her shaking. I was shaking too. I looked at my mom. Silent. Staring at her plate. She knew. She'd let it happen. And then Jake finally spoke, leaning back in his chair, looking me dead in the eye. You have no wife. No kids. No real life. What do you even need money for? The room went silent. My ears rang. He said it so casually, like I was some side character in his life. Like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't worth anything. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, knocking my chair over. Rachel grabbed my arm, whispering, "Not here." She was right. Not here. Not yet. Because they thought this was over. They thought they'd won. They had no idea. I played it smart. Didn't react. Didn't explode. Didn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I smiled. Nodded. Even let out a small laugh like I was amused. Sarah looked confused. Jake smirked, thinking I was just gonna take it. Yeah, you're right, I said, forcing my voice to stay even. I guess I don't need the money. Rachel stiffened beside me, but she caught on quick. She knew what I was doing. I let them think I was giving up. Let them feel safe. Because if I went nuclear that night, they'd have gone into damage control. Covered their tracks. Moved the money. Made it harder to tear their world apart. So I stayed calm. Let them dig their own graves. For weeks I acted normal. Sent vague texts to Mom like I was thinking about everything. Let Sarah's guilt trips roll in. Let Jake send his passive-aggressive hope we can move forward texts, like he hadn't just robbed me blind. Meanwhile, I was building my case. I dug through everything, Bank statements, credit reports, my dad's accounts. Found loans in my name I never signed for. A credit card maxed out at high-end furniture stores. Even a payday loan which was so beyond stupid I had to laugh. Rachel was the one who spotted the mortgage fraud. Since I'd co-signed their house years ago, I was still legally attached. And because Jake and Sarah were financial morons, they hadn't made a real mortgage payment in almost a year. They were using my stolen inheritance to pay the minimums, all while taking out even more loans. Then I remembered the default clause in our co-sign agreement. If they missed too many payments, I could take the house. They hadn't read the fine print, but I had. And then the cherry on top, Rachel found Sarah's Facebook flexing. Luxury bags, fancy dinners, a Disney trip, all while crying broke and calling me a traitor. I saved everything. Screenshots, documents, a full forensic trail of their lies. Then I made one last move. Let them take out one more loan in my name. One final act of greed. And the second it processed, I sent everything to my lawyer. Because they thought they'd won. They had no idea their entire world was about to collapse. The day everything fell apart was Christmas. Rachel and I showed up exactly at 2 p.m. just like Mom told us to. Walked in with presents, Rachel holding one of her famous homemade pies. But the second we stepped inside, I could feel it. Something was off. The room went silent. Sarah was smirking like she had some inside joke. Jake barely looked at me. Only one who acted normal was Tommy, my nephew. He ran up, all excited, trying to show me a coding project from school. But Jake yanked him back. Don't bother your uncle with that computer stuff. He's too busy being important. The kid's face fell. That should have been my first clue. Then Sarah spoke. Oh, Rachel, you should stay. You need to hear this since you're so interested in our family's money. Rachel stiffened. I frowned. What the hell was going on? Jake leaned forward, real serious. Listen, while Dad was sick, we had to make some family decisions. Sarah cut in, still with that sickly sweet voice. Your brother did what needed to be done. We had power of attorney. Everything is in Jake's name now. The house, the garage, Dad's savings, everything. I froze. You mean Dad's inheritance? Jake wouldn't even look at me. It's done. I could barely hear over the ringing in my ears. You can't just... We already did, Sarah interrupted. And it's perfectly legal. She was smiling. I turned to my mom. You knew about this? She wouldn't look at me. Just whispered, they needed it more than you. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I reminded them about all the money I'd already given. The bills I paid. The medical expenses. The times I helped with their mortgage. Sarah actually laughed. Oh please, you think throwing us spare change makes you a hero? We deserve that money. We're real family, not some stuck-up computer guy who thinks he's too good for us. That's when they went after Rachel. Said she was probably cheating on me. That she was just using me for my money. That she looked down on them for being working class. Rachel sat there, hands shaking, but stayed silent. Me. I stood up. Done. Mom gave me one last ultimatum. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. So we left. And that was the moment I decided. I was going to destroy them. That night, Rachel cried in the car. Not because of what they said about her, she was used to people judging her, but because she felt guilty, like she'd somehow caused this rift between me and my family. That made me feel worse than anything they'd said. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. Every little red flag I ignored started playing back. The way Jake and Sarah kept asking about my schedule. The sudden interest in my banking details. How they always knew when Rachel and I were out of town. I grabbed my laptop and started checking. Bank accounts. Gone. The money Dad had set aside for me? Transferred. My name was on new loans I never took out. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd used it as collateral for more loans. Over $250,000 in my name. And get this, they hadn't made a single payment. It was worse than I thought. Rachel woke up to me still typing. What are you doing? I turned the screen so she could see. Her eyes went wide. She flipped through the documents, hands shaking. This is fraud. They could go to jail. She wasn't wrong. But I wasn't going to call the cops yet. That would have been too easy. No. They needed to feel safe first. So I played along. Didn't block their numbers. Kept responding to mom's guilt trip texts with vague, non-committal answers. Let them think I was considering making peace. Meanwhile, I documented everything. Emails, bank statements, screenshots of Sarah bragging on social media about their sudden success. Even their new kitchen renovation, paid for with Dad's medical GoFundMe. And then, I waited. Let them take out one last payday loan in my name. Let them dig the hole even deeper. And the second they did, I handed everything to my lawyer. That was the final nail in their coffin. And they never even saw it coming. I wasn't about to let Jake and Sarah get away with stealing my inheritance, my credit, and my dignity. If they thought I was just going to roll over and take it, they clearly forgot who they were messing with. I might not have been the tough guy growing up, but I had something they never did: patience and intelligence. I wasn't about to go nuclear just yet. First, I needed to make sure I had every piece of evidence possible. For the next few weeks, I played dumb. I didn't block their numbers, didn't argue with them, and even responded to mom's guilt trip texts like I was considering making peace. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was going full forensic accountant. Step 1. Tracking every stolen dollar. I combed through my accounts, bank statements, and credit reports. Every forged signature, every fraudulent transaction, every fake loan they had taken in my name, I documented it all. Jake and Sarah were sloppy, they never thought I'd check. They'd used my good credit to secure massive loans against the house they were living in, racked up credit card debt in my name, and even withdrew money directly from Dad's accounts before he passed. Step 2. Building my legal case. I wasn't about to just yell at them over the phone or confront them in person. I needed something that would hold up in court. I worked with Rachel's dad, an ex-accountant, to compile everything into a detailed report. Then I took it all to my lawyer. The moment he saw it, he just shook his head and said, "They really thought they could get away with this?" He assured me I had more than enough to press charges for fraud, identity theft, and financial abuse. Step 3. Letting them think they won. This was the hardest part. Every time Sarah sent me a smug text about real family values, or Jake called me soft for not standing up for myself, I had to bite my tongue. But I needed them to feel secure, to think I wasn't going to fight back. That way they'd keep spending and keep digging their hole deeper. I even let them take out one last payday loan in my name, which turned out to be their final mistake. Once the bank flagged that loan as fraudulent, everything started to crumble. The day everything went down, I was calm as hell. I had spent weeks preparing for this, making sure every legal angle was covered. Once I had all my documents lined up, I did 3 things. First, I filed fraud reports with the banks and credit bureaus. This meant that every single credit card, loan, and financial move tied to my name was immediately flagged. Accounts were frozen, cards were canceled, and any pending transactions were halted. Sarah had no idea. She was probably out shopping, thinking she still had unlimited access to my name. Second, I sent a cease and desist letter through my lawyer. This legally notified them that I was coming after them. It also forced them to stop any financial activity under my name, which wrecked their entire lifestyle overnight. Third, I made a single call to the mortgage company, reminding them of the default clause in the loan agreement. See, since I co-signed for their house, I had the right to take over ownership if they defaulted. And guess what? They had missed payments for months. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. Jake called me that evening, furious. "What the hell did you do?" he screamed. "They're saying the house is being taken over." I kept my voice even. "Yeah, because you stopped paying the mortgage, genius. The contract lets me take it back. Maybe you should have read it before signing. You can't do this." Sarah screeched in the background. "Actually, I can," I replied. "And I already did." The bank gave them 30 days to vacate, and there was nothing they could do about it. Within days, their entire world collapsed. The moment Sarah realized their credit cards had been shut down, she went ballistic. I know this because she left 12 screaming voicemails back to back. She tried to book a salon appointment, declined. She tried grocery shopping, declined. Jake, he had bigger problems. Turns out, when you get caught committing identity fraud, the banks don't just let it slide. His fraudulent activity got flagged across multiple accounts, tanking his credit score overnight. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it meant they couldn't get another house, couldn't finance a car, and couldn't even rent a decent apartment. Then the legal consequences hit. I officially filed fraud charges against them, and with all the evidence I had, the court didn't waste any time. Within 2 months they were in court facing massive lawsuits. The judge took one look at my folder of receipts and bank statements and ruled in my favor. That meant wage garnishment. Every paycheck they made from now on, a chunk of it was coming straight to me. Sarah tried playing the victim online, posting about how wealthy people crush struggling families. I responded with a single post listing every single payment I made for them over the years, including the $400,000 they stole from me. The internet ripped them apart. People from our old neighborhood turned against them, friends cut them off, and their church even dropped them after realizing they scammed them for donations. But the best part? That house, I officially bought it back at foreclosure. Sarah had planned for her parents to buy it so they could keep living there, but I outbid them just to make sure that never happened. When Jake and Sarah were finally kicked out, I was waiting in my car across the street, watching as they packed their stuff into a beat-up old truck. Sarah saw me and flipped me off. I just smiled and waved. At this point, Jake and Sarah had lost everything. Their house, their credit, their reputation, and any financial support from me or anyone else. Meanwhile, I moved to a new house with Rachel, secured my finances, and thrived without them. Mom still tried to guilt-trip me, saying they were homeless and struggling. But the truth was, they made their own choices, I just made sure they paid for them. Now, it's time for action where I wrap everything up and show how I moved on without them dragging me down anymore. Ready? With Jake and Sarah officially out of the house, their credit in shambles and their reputation destroyed, I knew my job was done. I didn't need to keep tabs on them, I had bigger things to focus on. But of course, just because I was done with them didn't mean they were done with me. A week after they got kicked out, I got a call from Mom. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the best of me. Jake and Sarah are struggling, she started. They're staying in a motel. Their kids have to switch schools. Can't you do something? I sighed. I did something, Mom. I gave them every opportunity to do the right thing. They chose to steal from me instead. But they're family. I shook my head, already done with this conversation. No, Mom. Family doesn't do what they did. They made their choices. Now they live with them. I hung up before she could try another guilt trip. The reality was, I had no regrets. I spent years paying their bills, helping them, supporting them, and in return they saw me as nothing more than a walking bank account. They stole from me, trashed my house, tried to ruin my life, and thought I'd just take it. They were wrong. Jake lost his mechanic job. Turns out, having fraud charges on your record doesn't sit well with employers. Last I heard, he was doing odd jobs and complaining to anyone who'd listen about how I ruined his life. Sarah's social media sob story backfired. Instead of getting sympathy, she got called out for being a fraud. Most of her friends dropped her, and she had to take a retail job to pay for basic expenses. Mom finally saw the truth too late. After realizing I wasn't going to fix this mess, she stopped defending them as much. But by the time she tried to apologize to me, I'd already moved on. Their kids were the only ones I felt bad for. They didn't ask for any of this. That's why I anonymously paid for my nephew Tommy's coding camp after I found out he won his school's competition. And as for the house they stole from me, it's now rented out to a wonderful family who actually takes care of it, unlike Jake and Sarah. And best believe I put a clause in the lease that permanently bans Jake and Sarah from ever living there again. Rachel and I moved into a new place, a beautiful home that we bought together with zero financial baggage from my past. I changed my phone number, my email, and blocked every single one of them from ever contacting me again. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about my paycheck disappearing into someone else's pocket. I was free. At work, without the constant family drama weighing me down, I started excelling even more. Last month, I got another promotion, and Rachel and I are now planning our wedding for next spring. A small, intimate ceremony, surrounded only by people who actually love and respect us. One night, Rachel and I were sitting on the couch, just relaxing, when she looked at me and said, Do you ever think about them? I thought for a second, then smirked. Oh, I let it go, I said, leaning back. I just don't forget. Because at the end of the day, they made their choices. And I made mine. And mine led to a life without them weighing me down. The best revenge? Just living well. The end.